Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Farrell, and I'm here on behalf of the marketing team at School Health. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Are you ready to save a life? Cardiac Emergency Preparedness in Schools. Joining us is Dr. Heather Baker. Dr. Baker is a sudden cardiac arrest survivor, elementary school principal, and mom to a 1.5-year-old son with a congenital heart defect. She has advocated strongly for cardiac emergency preparedness in schools and recently helped the American Heart Association pass House Bill 5394 in Illinois, which requires schools to have a cardiac emergency response plan. As a certified CPR instructor, Dr. Baker has trained over 5,000 people since 2018, and her research regarding cardiac emergency preparedness in schools will be published later this fall. Dr. Baker, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule today to be with us. And we'd also like to thank everyone who's joined us in this hour. Before I turn the time over to Dr. Baker, I would like to review a few quick things about today's webinar. We are giving away a Zoll AED3 at the end of today's presentation. All attendees will be entered, and one winner will be randomly selected, so stay tuned to see if you've won. We will not be taking audio questions, but you can submit your questions at any time via the Questions Interface tab in GoToWebinar. This webinar will be recorded. It will be posted on the schoolhealth.com website. We'll also email you the link with your certificate of attendance. Now let's turn the time over to Dr. Baker.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for logging in if you are here with me today. I know we have people from all different careers and walks of life here, so thank you for logging in. I am here in my principal's office at my school in Winnebago, Illinois. So if you are logging in from a school, I am right there with you. Today, what will we be talking about? The very first objective is I'm going to hopefully give you an idea of what sudden cardiac arrest is and how to respond when it occurs. To help you understand the current requirements and recommendations for cardiac emergency preparedness in schools, and lastly, to learn how to make your school heart safe. My school district in Illinois, Winnebago, Illinois, is one of the first in our state to be considered a heart-safe school district. And what that means is that we have taken extra steps to make sure that we are prepared for a cardiac emergency. This is our Project Adam Heart Safe School designation banner with some of my staff members outside of our school. We got this designation 2 years ago now and are so proud to be having that designation. Today I will tell you how you can go about doing the same thing, and with or without the credential, just becoming more heart safe. Now, you heard in my bio that I'm a sudden cardiac arrest survivor. And a lot of people ask me, why does she care about this issue as a principal? But it's my experience with sudden cardiac arrest that makes me so passionate about this topic. On February 1st, 2018, this is a selfie I took that morning. I was 28 years old and I was a brand new school administrator. I had just started that year as a curriculum director in a district nearby called Pecatonica School District. Again, 28 years old, perfectly healthy. Went to the gym almost every day, exercised, ate healthy, and saw my doctors regularly. I woke up feeling pretty normal. I went to a meeting at the school, and I had a couple of meetings that day. A couple of them lasted a couple hours long. I had to drive across town, come back, and when I got to my last meeting of the day, I walked in the door, sat my things on the table, and started talking to the other administrators in the room. Suddenly, the room started to spin, and I felt like I was going to get sick. I looked across the table, and I made eye contact with the school psychologist sitting across from me. I tried to say, I feel sick, but I didn't get any words out. I took one step towards the door and collapsed. I fell face first into the table and dropped to the floor dead. At that point in time, I was in ventricular fibrillation, meaning my heart was shaking and quivering. I was in sudden cardiac arrest, and I was no longer pumping blood to the rest of my body. Very fortunately for me, two people in the room that day knew what to do. Tim and Bill were administrators in the room with me that day. Bill was our superintendent on the left, and Tim was our middle school principal on the right. Together, they worked together to provide me hands-only CPR and use the school's AED to shock my heart 3 times. I was placed in a medically induced coma, and by the end of the day, my family was told that I would likely never walk or talk again on my own. Very fortunately, the next day, I woke up and within 2 weeks went back to work. To which I say, what do you got to do to get time off around here, right? But 2 weeks later, I was very fortunate to go back to work because my life was saved by these two very special individuals. They were able to not only recognize the signs of a sudden cardiac arrest, know that CPR and AED were necessary, and they did them in a timely manner. That's why I'm still alive today. And what I have learned is that if you have a heart, it can happen to you too. This is not some freak incident that only happened to me and isn't going to happen anywhere else. Sudden cardiac arrest can and does happen frequently. What I have learned about heart disease since my sudden cardiac arrest really blew my mind at first. And heart disease is the leading global cause of death, killing about 18.6 million people per year. So this is an issue that impacts a lot of people, not just sudden cardiac arrest, but heart disease altogether. In the US, 1 in 4 people die of heart disease each year. And heart disease kills more people each year than all forms of cancer combined. Now, you may know the difference between cardiac arrest and heart attack, but I didn't. When this first happened to me, I had never heard of this. And what I have found is that people I worked with hadn't heard of it either. So if you have heard this before, bear with me. I'm going to give just a brief overview of what these two terms mean. But your heart functions on both plumbing and electricity, I like to say. So when a person has a heart attack, the plumbing to their heart gets clogged in some capacity. They get a blocked artery. And over time, less and less blood gets sent to the heart. And your heart is a muscle and it starts to weaken or die. That's what's called a heart attack, when the plumbing isn't working properly. Blood's not getting to your heart. On the other side of things, your heart has electricity that works. Now, my school is an older school, and very frequently the lights might flicker really fast. And it happened actually yesterday a couple of times. I was having a meeting right here in my office. The lights flickered a few times, and I thought, that's weird. But I didn't think, oh no, something bad's going to happen to the school. The electricity is going to go out. I kind of just went about my day. Now, if the electricity in your heart flickers for even a second, so to speak, that would send you into sudden cardiac arrest. And there's a lot of things that could cause a sudden cardiac arrest. But if that electrical activity stops working or isn't working properly, time is of the essence and that person needs help immediately. When a sudden cardiac arrest occurs, there are often no signs or symptoms prior to the event. So it makes it a little bit harder on the prevention side than heart attack. A lot of people don't know that they have irregular electrical activity, or some people are born with some conditions that might make them more prone to having electrical issues, but a lot of times people don't know that because basic EKGs are not usually a part of your school physicals, your sport physicals, or just your basic trip to the doctor, right? So a lot of people don't know that they have these issues. Of course, anybody who is maybe watching this and saying, oh, occasionally I have some weird rhythms or things like that, highly encourage you to seek medical attention. Now, there are some myths I've heard since surviving my sudden cardiac arrest that I wanted to talk about today. One of those myths is that sudden cardiac arrest only impacts older people, overweight people, and generally unhealthy people. This just is not true. Close to 400,000 people in the United States experience out-of-hospital sudden cardiac arrest each year, including around 7,000 to 10,000 children and teens. And people also think in the event that this happens, I really should just wait for EMS to come. I've called 911. I'm just going to stay here with the victim. I'm just going to stand by their side. This is not the action that we want. Time is of the essence. When a sudden cardiac arrest occurs, odds of survival triple if the bystander can provide CPR and AED within the first 3 minutes of collapse, which is much quicker than the average response time for EMS. You have to factor in that somebody has to call, they have to talk to the dispatcher. All of that takes time. So you're really looking at a 9 to 11-minute average for EMS to arrive to the scene. If you want that person to survive and have the best brain functioning possible, like I had, you need to start CPR and AED immediately. A lot of people think too, I really just don't see this happening at a school. I haven't heard about it. I don't think this would happen to kids. And this is not true. Sudden cardiac arrest is and has been for quite a while the number one cause of death for student athletes. It is quite prevalent. And on top of that, when we're talking about making cardiac safe schools, it's not just for the children, it's for everybody who enters the school on a daily basis, not just the staff, but the grandma who brings a water bottle that a kid forgot, the mom who stops by to bring lunch, or the sweatshirt, or the coat, or the project, somebody coming in for parent teacher conferences, a choir concert, an athletic event. Over 20% of the US population enters a school on a daily basis. And the point of making schools heart safe is to make that whole community safer. Dr. Dresner researched sudden cardiac arrest in schools, and what he found is that about 1 in 70 high schools have a sudden cardiac arrest each year. Athletic events were the sites of about 66% of cases, and it was about 50-50 between the victim being a student or an adult. So 44% were students, 44% were students, and about 56% were adults. The AED from the school was applied in about 85% of those cases, and a shock was delivered about 66% of the time. With that, survival rates were much higher when the school used their own AED, waiting for EMS to bring an AED, 80% of survival versus 50%. And survival rates were higher when that school had a cardiac emergency response plan. So that sets the scene of what our schools need to do in order to help victims survive. I am going to show you a video now about a student named Claire. Now, Claire was a high school student who experienced a sudden cardiac arrest during a school volleyball game. After the video, we'll talk about what made her survival possible. right? And we're going to get our slides pulled back up here in just a second, but I love to show this video because it really helps to show that this does happen at schools. It happens to kids. And getting this pulled up here for you. And that it can happen at your school too. I'm going to switch this over and we're good. So, what happened to Claire? She said that it was a miracle and that she felt really blessed to have been chosen to go to the school that she did. And I'm very glad that she went to the school that she did too. I'm so glad that Claire is okay and that she is alive today. But shouldn't every child go to school and it not matter where they go to school and they can be safe at school? That's what I dream of. I dream of every person being able to enter a school and people knowing how to save their life. Similarly, we had Damar Hamlin's incident on January 2nd, 2023, when he experienced a traumatic sudden cardiac arrest on the football field on national television. Very fortunately, his life was saved, similar to Claire, by people who had had a practiced plan and response. The common denominator between the survival of both of these people were not money or not the fact that one's in the NFL and one isn't. The fact was that there were CPR AED trained people there. They had a practice plan and they were able to jump into action immediately. And fortunately, both of these people were saved because of that. So my story and these stories inspire me to bring this message of heart safe schools to all of you. So what do the current laws and recommendations look like for schools? Well, this is a map of the states that currently require CPR in schools for high school students. So the majority of our US states at this point now require high school students to learn CPR and AED prior to high school graduation or a part of the mandated health curriculum. It's worded a little bit differently in each state. These are the states that require teachers or school staff to know CPR and AED. And I will give a little caveat that just because the state is blue does not mean that all teachers or all staff are required. In many of these states, only one person in the building has to be trained, or maybe it's just a recommendation that people are trained. There are only 4 current states in the United States that require teachers to be certified in CPR. So in general, we have a lot of kids learning CPR and AED, but we don't necessarily have a lot of adults and school staff learning CPR and AED. And therein lies our problem, in my opinion. So what would make a school prepared? Like I talked about with Claire, we need CPR and AED trained staff members. And we will talk about the difference between certification and trained, because I am not saying that you have to go pay a lot of money and spend a lot of time to certify every single staff member. So hold tight and I'll tell you more about that. You need to have access to AEDs. You need to make sure that all of your AEDs are in a place where if somebody collapsed, you could get to the AED and back to the victim within 3 minutes so that you give that person the best odds of survival. So not only having AEDs, putting them in mindful places, having enough of them, making sure they work, and making sure that everybody in the building knows where they are the important things we'll talk about. Having a cardiac emergency response plan. This is really important. Just like we have drills for fire drills, tornado drills, we might have an active shooter drill at this point at your school. Similarly, we want to have a cardiac emergency response plan that could be accompanied by a practiced drill that would just show people the different steps to responding to that type of emergency. So I'm going to talk you through each of those steps. And so how can you make your school heart safe? I always like to give people resources. And the very first most important resource I'm going to provide to you, I found as a principal. I went back to work 2 weeks later after my cardiac arrest, and I said, I want the school I'm working at to be prepared for a cardiac emergency. And I just started Googling, to be honest with you, and I found Project Adam. I have since been volunteering for them for about 6 years now, and they are an incredible organization. What they do is they help provide schools with free resources to becoming heart safe. So they will provide you with templates for cardiac emergency response plans, drills. They'll come out and help you do drills. and all kinds of other resources that I'm going to walk you through. That QR code will come back up at the end of the presentation, but that will take you to the Project Adam website where you can find all of the materials I'm about to walk you through. And Project Adam is growing very quickly. So this map shows you all of the states that currently have an affiliate. And I'm here to tell you that if you're watching from a state that doesn't have an affiliate, another state will help you. It is a very kind, friendly organization that wants kids to be safer at school and people to be safer at school. So don't hesitate to reach out, even if your state is not in the red, so to say. So Project Adam has a Heart Safe School checklist, and it has 14 checkpoints broken into a couple of main categories: AEDs, response team, a response plan, staff training, and drills. I'm going to walk you through each of those areas, but this is a screenshot of what their website currently looks like. If you scroll down, it'll say templates and resources to become heart safe. All of these things are free materials that can help your school to become heart safe, whether or not you decide to become an officially designated heart safe school through them. So if you did any of those drop downs, it would show you all of these links, and we will go through these a little more closely, but it has response plan templates, how to choose an AED, where to place an AED, the checklist that you can print out, all kinds of resources. I didn't put them all on there. So starting with AEDs, the checklist recommends that your AED should be placed throughout the campus in areas that are visible and accessible. And like I said before, you should be able to get to that AED and back to a victim in under 3 minutes. That doesn't just mean the principal can do it or the nurse can do it, right? Anybody in the building, even a visitor to the building, should be able to say, oh yeah, there's the AED because it has a sign. I know where it is. I can get it. I can get back to the victim. So our district, we had to buy more signs. And I know one of our district school nurses is on right now. So shout out to her. She helped me order signs to make sure all of our buildings clearly labeled our AEDs, and then stickers on the front door that said, we have an AED here, that type of thing. You also need to be checking those AEDs monthly, checking the battery, making sure it works, checking the pads. And if you need any of those things replaced, you can always contact school health for new pads, new batteries, things like that. But you want to make sure that that device is ready to go when it's needed. And with that device, you should have a first responder kit. They're usually pretty small, like a little zip bag. It could be a little pouch. It could be within your AED. It could look a little bit different, but it's helpful to have things like gloves, a face mask, a razor, scissors to cut off any clothing that you might need to, and maybe a towel to wipe down the victim. So that is all, those are all really important things when considering AEDs in a school setting. Response team. So when you are in the school and you say, I want to make our school heart safe, I recommend, highly recommend having a team of individuals that is passionate about this process. And they are the cardiac emergency response team. They will oversee the creation of your plan, the running of the drills, and the training. They are not the only people who can respond to a cardiac emergency. So this is not to say, hey, you 5 people are on the team. If there is a cardiac emergency, only you can do CPR. No, that's not the point. The point is that we can leverage those people to help us oversee the process, to be called in to help respond. But it's really important that you make sure your staff at your building knows that whoever finds the victim first is a first responder and is going to start CPR. That team should be comprised of around 10% of your entire staff, or 5 to 10 people. If you have a huge, huge staff, you might be saying, oh my gosh, Heather, 10% would be a massive committee. So maybe think more 5 to 10 people. But my tip is that you should just probably consider using a school safety team that you already have. In Illinois, we're required to have a school safety team that meets each year to review different things. And so you can leverage those same people. Or you can ask for volunteers who are passionate about this. In my building, I was really mindful about first volunteers. Asked people, are you interested? We went through a presentation. I explained to them what we were trying to do. They obviously know my story. And I said, who wants to be a part of this? And we did not turn anybody away. But then I made sure that every part of my building was represented. And I mean, like geographically part of my building. We have a wing So I wanted somebody from the wing. I wanted somebody from the kitchen. I wanted somebody from upstairs, from downstairs, from all the way at the end of the building, so that if there was an emergency, we do have more coverage across our building. But again, I really want to emphasize that your team is not the only person who can apply an AED, call 911, and start CPR. Anybody on your school staff should know that they have permission to do that and should do that. So now a response plan. This is the part that I think can sound overwhelming at first. We have a lot of plans at schools and we think, I don't even know where to start, right? I highly recommend using the Project Adam website or the American Heart Association website. They actually teamed up to make their plans essentially the same. This screenshot is from the Project Adam website, and if you look under the Cardiac Emergency Response Plan dropdown, they have actually 5 templates: a long version of a cardiac emergency response plan, and then 4 abbreviated versions. So when you do this, you can just look at all the templates, look at all 5, see which one works best for your school, and customize it however you want. Maybe you want a hybrid of multiple plans. That's great, but you can use one of these plans, put your school's name on it, and essentially be done. It's that easy. This is a plan that you want to review annually, and you might make small changes to it. You might not change it at all, but it is great and important to review it with that team of people. What we did, we had a committee meet. We met for 20 minutes. We went through the checklist to see where are we, what do we need to do. The school nurse downloaded all of these templates for us, and she put them on the table and showed them to the committee. We looked them over, and people said, yeah, I think I like this one. The school nurse then customized it, brought it back to a second meeting that was only about 15 minutes long. We all looked it over, made some minor tweaks, and then said, yep, it's good to go. We then printed that on a lime green paper, laminated it, and put it everywhere in the building. It's by the AEDs, it's by the cafeteria, and it's in every classroom, so that it is easy to spot, even for a visitor, even for a substitute, for a coach, for a community member, that they can find our plan really, really quickly. We also asked for feedback from our local EMS when we created our plan. I sent the plan. I said, hey, what do you think about this? And Project Adam recommends that on their checklist. We sent that plan out to anybody who uses our building. So whether that's the after school club who watches kids after school, youth sports that rent our building, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, people who use my building, everybody was sent a copy of this plan. And again, it's posted so that they can see it. My last tip for plans, and it crosses over a little bit into drills, but when you write that plan, I highly recommend avoiding the use of code words. And we talk about this a lot with our school emergencies nowadays. If we use code words, we might isolate people who could otherwise help us. Let's say I have a substitute teacher, and in her former career, she used to be a paramedic. If I go onto the loudspeaker and say code green, and she has no idea what that means, she's not going to be able to help us with that emergency. In my plan and at my building, we say cardiac emergency, in the gym, CPR needed. It's just very clear. So anybody can respond to that emergency and not question, what does that mean? We want the best chances of survival, right? So this is actually my school's plan. It's just a screenshot for you. And if you email me this after, I would be happy to email it right to you. Now, when I look at this plan, rather than thinking of it sequentially, steps 1 through 12, I really think about it as 12 things that need to be done. And a lot of these things can and should be happening simultaneously, okay? So somebody is going to call 911 right away. And an important thing that I told my staff is that a lot of our school plans previously said, get the school nurse first and let her come out or him come out and decide whether or not that person needs CPR. We scratched that from our plan. We said the first person who gets there, you call 911, you start CPR. Somebody else go notify the office. The office is going to make an announcement. Hopefully more people are going to come. Somebody's doing CPR. Somebody gets the AED, puts the pads on the victim. The office calls for that cardiac team to respond. So they would come out. They might help with things like maintaining the crowd, getting kids out of the building. We did this drill outside on the playground at recess, and we needed adults to bring the kids back inside. So there are plenty of jobs for people to do, waiting for EMS to show them where to go, calling the victim's emergency contacts, looking up their little medical emergency card. There's a lot of things to be done. And so the great thing about this plan is that it gets people thinking about all of the different roles, not just necessarily step 1 through 3. They learn the roles that need to be filled during a cardiac emergency. And then every time we do a drill, people's role might change a little bit. And those are great discussions. So again, I really recommend having a plan, using a template so that you don't have to create your plan from scratch, disseminating that to everybody in the building, talking them through it. The other piece that I'm very passionate about, you heard that I've CPR trained over 5,000 people and counting, and I don't plan to stop anytime soon. CPR and AED saved my life, and it has saved so many lives. So we need to provide CPR and AED training to all staff members. We need to review it at least once per year, and we need to make sure that everybody knows where the AED or multiple AEDs are located. Lastly, something I'm very passionate about is making sure people know how to recognize a sudden cardiac arrest because it might not look the way that people think. So for me, during my sudden cardiac arrest, when I collapsed, my body was shaking, quivering, rolling, and I was gasping for air, something called agonal breathing. The people in my room were CPR and AED trained, and that's how they recognized agonal breathing and knew it was a sudden cardiac arrest. So here are some helpful tips from my perspective as a principal providing CPR and AED training in school. CPR certification is not required by many states for staff. States are starting to require some training. Illinois just passed that law recently, but training and certification are different. CPR training can be completed in just a few minutes. You can use free online resources, videos that you find online. I know American Heart Association and American Red Cross have CPR videos online for free. And you can buy training supplies through School Health. If you don't have a budget for buying training supplies, you can utilize pillows, stuffed animals, or dodgeballs. I've used dodgeballs to train kids in CPR, and they work out great. And most schools would have these items, or you could request that staff bring it to school with them. Hey, bring a ball, bring a pillow. We're going to practice CPR. We don't have mannequins. However, I really urge you to leverage your local EMS and hospitals because a lot of them have materials you can use. And they might just come out and do the training for you. So reach out to the hospital, the fire department, the police department, say, hey, we're looking to have training. Can we borrow some mannequins? Or even better yet, can you come do the training for us, right? So this looks like this at my school. I put together with my school nurse a very basic slide deck, and we use it twice a year to CPR train all of my staff. We do it during a staff meeting, and it only takes us 20 minutes. In the slides are a very brief overview of what sudden cardiac arrest is and what agonal breathing looks like. We then move into a very short video that shows how to give chest compressions. Then we put on some music and we have everybody in the room practice chest compressions. They share mannequins that we are very fortunate to have as a school district. And so we share them, we pass them around, and everybody gets to practice. While they're doing that, myself and the school nurse, we walk around, we answer questions, we check, we give pointers. Hey, push a little harder, push a little slower, that type of thing. We then have everybody go back to their seats and we show a quick video, about 2-minute long video on how to use an AED. We hold ours up, the particular model that we have. We remind people where they're located, and then we use training AEDs to let people practice. The last part of that training for us is we put up our cardiac emergency response plan, and we talk through each of the roles that people could play. Somebody could be calling 911, everything we talked about before. What are those roles? What needs to happen? We answer questions, and then we're done within 20 minutes. We do that twice a year. So 20 minutes and free. It didn't cost us any money because we were not certifying people. So I challenge you to think outside the box on how you could provide training and not think about a 2.5-hour paid costs money certification course. We can be a little more creative than that. And I'm always happy to help answer questions or help in any other way that I can. So, the very last piece of becoming a heart safe school, and the piece that I feel is really important, even if it's not required by state law, is to run a drill. Now, a drill can be done with or without kids there. So you could do this before school, after school, during contract time. You could do it on a teacher institute day or school improvement day. You could do it during the summer, a break, whatever your committee decides that they want to do. The first time that we did a drill, we decided to do it after school. We have 10 minutes, the kids leave, and then we have 10 minutes of teacher contract time. So during that time, the school nurse put a mannequin in an area of the school, and then we kind of just said, oh no, there's a cardiac emergency. And we waited how long to see how long it would take for people to understand what was going on and put that chain of survival into action, right? So what the nurse was doing throughout that time, neither of us helped. We were just watching, but we timed things and I took notes and we said, how long did it take before somebody acknowledged the victim? Did somebody check for responsiveness? Did somebody call 911? Did someone get the AED? Did someone start CPR? And did we get the CPR and AED started in under 3 minutes? That is the goal of your drill. I recommend inviting your local EMS. So our fire chief attended and our school resource officer attended as well. Their insight was invaluable. They are used to responding to emergencies. That's what they do. And they can give really practical tips. Now, if you can't have an expert come and help you, Project Adam has a drill checklist. So this goes through all of the pieces of that cardiac emergency response plan. And so you can literally just check things off as you are watching this drill go by. Again, did somebody start CPR? How much time went by? How quickly did they get it started? When was the first shock delivered? If you don't have a training AED, please do not use your real AED. Don't put those pads on a mannequin or a pillow or whatever you are using as a fake victim. Okay, so just pretend, just get the AED there, pretend to be putting them on, that type of thing if you only have a real AED. But again, if you're interested in buying a trainer, talk to school health. They have just about everything. A drill realistically takes less than 10 minutes. Each time my school has been able to get the AED to the victim in under 6 minutes. Okay, we're not always at that threshold of 3 minutes, which is why we keep practicing, but it has never taken us more than those 6 minutes. And it doesn't really require any type of funding or even planning. We have an upcoming drill pretty soon. I'm not going to reveal the time or date or place in case someone from my school is listening, but we will be running a surprise drill with children present. If you do have children present, consider maybe notifying parents. However, when we've notified parents about a drill like this at school, I've actually gotten a lot of gratitude. I've had people say, wow, we think this is really important and really cool, and thank you for doing this and for keeping our kids safe. Everybody wants their child safe at school, and personally, I've gotten zero backlash from doing these types of drills with children present. When you do this with children present, it gives you a much more realistic feel for how things are going to go. When a committee member gets called over the loudspeaker to respond to a cardiac emergency but has a class full of kids, what do they do? Are there other people in the building who are thinking about, oh, I need to go cover a classroom? Or when we did ours on the playground, at first, nobody did move the kids, and the kids were just standing there watching, like, what is this? And we needed to get the kids out of the way. So once we had kids present, it felt much more organic, and we were able to work through some difficulties that we hadn't anticipated without kids there. So I do recommend trying it once you're a little bit confident. This is a little bit closer up of what that drill checklist looks like. And at the bottom, it highlights that the most important piece is that the drill is completed in under those 3 minutes, meaning that the AED was applied during those before 3 minutes was up. An important piece of this, though, which I feel is missing for maybe some of the other drills that we run in schools, is that we do a debriefing. And again, this is a template I got from the Project Adam website. They're just guiding questions. When we were at the 6 minute mark and we wanted to be at the 3 minute mark, we said, Why? What happened? What went well? What was a barrier that we didn't anticipate? What are we going to do differently next time? And we do that with our committee, but we also do that at our next staff meeting. It only takes about 5-10 minutes. And we say, hey, remember our drill? This is what it looked like. This was the result. And here's what we need to be mindful of next time. This is the part that my school really, really enjoys. They like being able to reflect. And then they might say to me, Heather, I feel like actually I want to get out a mannequin and practice compressions a little bit more because I was the person who had to do compressions and I didn't feel super confident. And then I say, yeah, grab one out of my office and practice anytime that you want. But the debriefing is very, very powerful. So if you do a drill, which I highly recommend, don't skip this step. You might think, what if school staff just doesn't really want to do this? Maybe you're a community member, maybe you are an administrator of a school and you think, I don't think my staff's going to go for this. I hear you, I'm a principal, and sometimes people aren't excited about new initiatives. But I had the honor of doing my own research, which is now published in the Journal of School Health. And in that research, I surveyed about 1,300 educators in the state of Illinois. And what I found was that only 39.5% said that they felt good about responding to a cardiac emergency. A very low number felt that they knew what to do, how to get their AED, and how to respond. But they wanted to be trained and they wanted to be prepared. So 67, almost 67% wanted more training on how to recognize just the signs of a sudden cardiac arrest. And again, they just didn't feel prepared. So only 60% had even been offered training at school. 73% thought, I just haven't had enough training at all. They were very in favor of being trained and even of training mandates. So in this study, 98.7% believed that all school staff should be CPR and AED trained. This was really, really exciting for me. In the case where I did some follow up talking to educators, they said, well, yeah, the kids have to know how to save a life. So why shouldn't I know how to save a life? So it's not fair to assume that our educators won't want this life-saving training. Go into it with optimism, explain the importance of why and how this could happen at their school, share my story, and I guarantee buy-in will be there. But if you need some help getting some buy-in for making your school heart safe, engage your local families. The number of children born with heart defects is very high, and the number of people impacted by heart disease is very high. Likely there are advocates in your community who have been touched by heart disease and would be willing to share their stories. Share the facts, like I shared with you at the beginning of this presentation today, about how grave and dangerous sudden cardiac arrest is. Consider attending a school board meeting and sharing your thoughts about heart safe schools with the school board. They love to have people from the community giving input. Same with the parent teacher organization. These are powerhouses. They can get things done. So if you feel like there's resistance from your child's school district about becoming heart safe, really leverage that parent teacher organization in that school board. Emphasize that this can be done truly entirely for free. My school did not spend a dime. Unless your school maybe needs to buy more AEDs or things like that. You can make a plan, run a drill with no money, and you can even provide CPR AED training without any money. And utilize the help of Project Adam. Not only their free materials, but reach out to them, and a real life person will get back to you and will offer to help you with so many of these things. So the main things I want you to leave here today knowing is that sudden cardiac arrest is the #1 killer of student athletes and a leading global cause of death. It can impact people of any age, gender, race, ethnicity, or fitness level. I never thought this would happen to me, and I didn't have any signs, symptoms, any warning that this would happen. CPR and AED training and cardiac emergency response plans are necessary to protect all individuals that enter a school, not just the kids, not just the teachers, but anybody entering our school on a daily basis. And all schools need to have AEDs that are accessible and functional. Lastly, our schools are a gateway for training millions of individuals in the US. So when you think about making schools heart safe, you're really talking about making communities safer. The people being trained at a school are going to go out into our community. Lastly, I like to share about my son, Easton. At 28 weeks pregnant, I found out that Easton had a really unique heart. So much so that it was not genetically connected to anything with my heart or my husband's heart, but he has his very own random congenital heart defect. And he is at very high risk for experiencing a sudden cardiac arrest, which is why I bought a Zoll AED for my house before coming home from the hospital with him. Easton worries me all day, every day. He's at daycare, he's out in the world, he's going to be going to school. And I need to know that people in our community will know how to keep him safe, because the reality is that all schools should be safe for all people. I feel that as a principal, that's my number one job. And as a mom, that's what I hope for our society, is that I don't have to worry when I send my almost 2 year old now to school someday, that I can guarantee he will be safe at school if something does happen to his heart. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening. And again, I have my contact information up there. Do not ever hesitate to email me. No question is too big or small. I'm happy to share resources. And that QR code will take you to the Project Adam website. Thank you very much for having me here.
Well, thank you, Dr. Baker. That was extremely impactful and covered so much information. We appreciate you sharing your personal experiences with us as well. We have received some questions from attendees, so we'll take a few minutes to answer those. We're also joined by Vince Pesavento, School Health's Emergency Preparedness Specialist, CPR instructor, and licensed paramedic. So Vince will be taking some questions as well. So we'll start with Heather. Diane asks, who would I contact to arrange or implement CPR training for a whole grade of students?
Yeah, great question. There are a lot of people you can contact. I would start by talking to your school nurse, and maybe that's you. So if that's you already, I have more suggestions. But a lot of our nurses have basic CPR and AED knowledge and can provide that training that I talked about rather than certification. I've actually trained students as young as first grade in CPR AED, and with their attention spans and what's age level appropriate, I leverage more of those videos and my own talking points rather than a full certification. Aside from that, talk to your local EMS and hospitals, fire department, police department. Your local hospital probably has a CPR trainer. They might be able to send people out. Lastly, on American Heart Association website and the Red Cross website, they each have ways that you can search for a CPR instructor in your area. So I suggest starting with any of those options.
All right, thanks, Heather. All right, Vince, Mitch has a question of how do you distinguish between hypoglycemic episodes and heart-related emergencies if a student has a pulse?
The best way to distinguish that is someone who's a hypoglycemic episode, they're going to have what's called an altered mental status. They may not be responding to a teacher or another adult or another student appropriately. They might be confused about what is going on and what is happening in the current situation they're in.
All right. Back to Heather. Donna wants to know, how often do you recommend having SCA drills in school?
Sure, at least once per year, but more than that if you want to. And it was actually my staff after we did a drill and we debriefed that wanted to do it again, because teachers, they are perfectionists, and I love that about you guys. But they were like, we can do better, Heather. Let us do another drill. So once you've debriefed and talked about what you can do better, it's super valuable to do it again. And so at least once a year, but the more the merrier.
All right. And then for Vince, if a student is non-responsive for an unknown reason and has good color, blood pressure, and a heart rate, should you still initiate CPR?
You should not. If the student definitely is got the good color and has a heart rate by checking a palpable pulse, then you know the student is breathing. One of the best things to do is to stay by the student, call 911, and make sure the student has an open airway. Because what can happen when someone goes unconscious and they lie on their back, the tongue will fall into the back of the airway and it'll start to occlude the airway. And the student may develop what we call snoring respirations or start snoring, and they're not getting good air exchange. So keeping that airway open until EMS arrives is the best thing to do.
All right, perfect. Now, this one you both may have an opinion on. I'd like to hear from both of you. How many AEDs should be on a school campus?
Ooh, I think there is not a hard and fast number. I think what it comes down to is making sure you can get to that AED and back to a victim within that 3 minute time. So, all of our schools are different sizes, our campuses are different sizes. What's needed at the high school in my district is different than what's needed at my elementary school. What could be helpful is having a local EMS, a firefighter, or somebody else come to your building and check out where your AEDs are placed. They can give you some really good feedback on whether or not they think you need more, if you need to move them. And again, you can walk your campus and say, oh, I don't think I can get there in 3 minutes. But most importantly, make sure it's not locked away somewhere. What do you think, Vince?
I would agree with you. A site assessment is the best thing to do. And a lot of people offer those site assessments because you may have, like you were saying, Heather, an AED in one location, but it might not be accessible to students or staff without going through a locked door where the site assessment will come in and says, no, the AED should be moved here. I also recommend AEDs roughly in 90 seconds of walking distance. Now, that's a lot of
Ooh.
AEDs, but that gets you to there and back to the emergency in enough time.
Right? You might need to consider putting one outside if your athletic fields are far away and there are boxes that are climate protected. And we did that in our district because there's no way that somebody could get from one of our athletic fields all the way back to the building in the event of emergency. So those are all things that they would consider during a site assessment.
And Heather, that is a great idea. The outdoor cabinets that they're heated and cool, keeping that defibrillator outside because you do have that playground. And, just like you said, you might be at recess and then you got to run back into the building to get the defibrillator to come back outside. So having one outside is a great idea. And that site assessment is a valuable tool that a lot of companies offer.
Mhm.
All right, and thank you both. Great, great information there. Um, and we have a question from Abby. Along with the quick hands-on training of 20 minutes, would you still encourage the certification as well for those who want it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I apologize for not saying that sooner. Certification is the gold standard. Absolutely. Everybody should strive for certifying as many people as possible. But again, I know that there are budgetary restraints and time constraints, right? So, yes, if you have the budget and if you have the ability, absolutely. And actually, our district, one of our nurses that's on the call right now, she does certification training with our staff periodically throughout the year on Teacher Institute days. So we've created a rolling schedule where everybody gets that certification in that 2 year recertification window, and we just keep rotating through people. So if they choose to go to that certification training, they can get recertified every 2 years. And with that, if you are a school administrator on this call, I recommend you look into getting people within your district certified to be certified trainers. So your school nurse, anybody, I'm one, anybody can become a certified CPR trainer. There is an initial cost, but then all of your trainings after that, you're not paying an organization to come in.
Okay, thank you. And we'll take a few more questions. One from Deborah to Vince. Um, although, of course, Heather, you may have an opinion on this as well. I'd like to hear information about liability to a teacher for hands-on medical care to a student in a public school.
When it comes down to that, most people are protected under what we call the Good Samaritan law. As long as they're acting in good faith, that Good Samaritan law will apply to them to allow them to do first aid, CPR, and other basic skills until EMS arrives. We could go on real long into the Good Samaritan law, but that kind of just is a quick sums it up that will protect them. Heather, in your opinion on a school administrator here?
Yeah, all states have a Good Samaritan law, and Vince said it correctly that everybody is protected underneath that Good Samaritan law. So if you are trying to save a life, you do CPR and AED. Let's say the person doesn't make it or they get an injury throughout the process, you would not be able to be found liable, most likely. I won't say never, never, because I'm not an attorney, but we do have that Good Samaritan law protecting people if they're acting in good faith.
All right. So a question for you, Heather, from Jill. How do you relay importance to administration when it comes to SEA?
Yeah, well, I start by encouraging, you can find my story. There is a video on YouTube. If you type in Heather Baker Hart, it's a very powerful, professionally made video that tells my story. You'll see my mom crying. You'll see the people who saved my life talking about it. But tell them the stories. Show them the video of Claire. There's a lot more out there on the internet, the real life stories, all of that data that I told you in the beginning about how it can and will happen at your school at some point in time. And again, if you're having trouble breaking through, even after doing that, talk to your school board, talk to the parent organization, and just keep trying. But I guarantee those stories are out there even in your local community. If there's a child with heart disease, there's an adult with heart disease, there's somebody who's lost someone. So leverage those people to help you.
All right. Thanks, Heather. And Vince, I'm going to hit you up with the last question here.
Right.
It's really, we're going to combine two because it is about AEDs in particular. What is the instance of failure of the AED pads, and how long will an AED last, or how often does software need to be updated?
First part of that question, the AED pads, is that there is no documented list of failure that I found. Some companies, unfortunately, have had some recalls on them. But as long as you keep up with your defibrillator and you're doing your regular monthly checks and inspecting them, as here in Illinois, you're required to do a visual inspection of that AED and document it once a month, you will have pads that are good and they're recommended by the manufacturer. Different manufacturers have different recommendations on pad lengths. You have some pads that are good for 2 years. You have some that can go up to 5 years. But then again, you just got to make sure you're doing the inspection and keeping up with them, that they're up to date and ready to go. As far as AED software, each manufacturer is a little bit different on how the upgrades go. Usually the manufacturer will email something to the customer, or when the customer pulls the defibrillator down, they can take it to their computer and they can do updates via Bluetooth or USB ports. So again, it's each manufacturer is different on that aspect and that end of updates.
All right, thank you. We're getting close to being time to close out. One message for attendees before we announce our winner. After you exit today's webinar, you'll see a survey window. This survey will not appear on the recording, but we ask each of you to please take a moment and answer this brief survey. It's important to help us improve what we've done here today. Now, the winner of our Zoll AED3, congratulations to Brenda Hooper from Nashville, Tennessee, on your new AED. We will be in touch with details. And again, I want to thank Dr. Baker and our very own Vince for joining us today. And again, should you have more questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the school health team as well. This will end today's broadcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.